NFL Team Preview Series is back here at FTN Network, and we're going to start with the Chicago Bears. A lot of questions from a fantasy perspective, and the first person I go to whenever I think of Chicago Bears is Jacob Infante. You can follow him on Twitter at JacobInfante24. He's a Bears writer for WC Gridiron. Jacob, thank you for joining us, and let's start with the most important question here, and that's that backfield. I've been in arguments on social media, Khalil Herbert, Donta Foreman, Roschon Johnson. How is this going to turn out here? Do we just draft the cheapest one? What do you think here's going to be the lead running back fantasy-wise for the Bears?
So I think especially early on, it's going to be Khalil Herbert. I think that he established himself early on as someone who's worthy of getting a fair shake at that role. He outperformed David Montgomery last year, and down the stretch, he was certainly the superior running back when both of them ended up being healthy. But that said, I don't feel confident drafting any Bears running back super early in fantasy, just because it's too many cooks in one kitchen. And Herbert's good. Foreman's coming off of a very good year with Carolina, especially after Christian McCaffrey got traded. And Roschon Johnson looked really good at Texas behind Bijan Robinson. So there's a really talented backfield with a lot of potential. I'd take whoever's the cheapest at that point, honestly. Looking at ADP, I haven't done a ton of looking into that from a fantasy perspective, but I can imagine it's probably Roschon. So with that in mind, he's probably the guy I'd focus on. But again, I'm not taking a running back super early out of that Bears backfield. I think as a whole, that unit is going to be very good and very efficient. But in terms of pure bell cow volume, I don't think that's probably what you're going to get from a fantasy perspective out of any of these guys.
Yeah, what you've seen with ADP is it was Khalil Herbert substantially ahead, and now it's very tight. On Underdog Fantasy for best ball drafts, they're about 10 picks apart, all three of them. And I think the key question would be the protection here for Justin Fields. Justin Fields was phenomenal, over 1,000 yards rushing, gets the goal line touches, of course, as well. So that plays into it here. My question is, do we expect to see a second-year improvement from Fields from a passing perspective in the passing game, because we know his running is outstanding. We know he gets those goal line touches. He could really become a top 3 overall seasonal fantasy option from start to finish if that passing efficiency can improve.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, from a pure fantasy perspective, I think Justin Fields has maybe as high of a ceiling as anyone in the NFL right now. I mean, I'd take Mahomes over him, and like definitively I'd take him, and then I'd take Josh Allen. And then there are a few guys I take before him, but it's an argument at that point, just because he's got such a high ceiling from a rushing perspective. You know that even if he doesn't top 1,000 yards again, he's going to get a lot of touches. He's going to rush for a good handful of touchdowns, and it's a better offensive line, better weapons. In an ideal world, that passing production takes a big jump. The ceiling's so high, and he was one of the top fantasy quarterbacks last year with, subpar passing production. So, I think, a lot's going to have to improve around him, but there's also going to be that level of accountability where, okay, it's your second year in this offense, your third year in general. We're going to start to need to see some, speed up the processing a little bit, stop holding onto the ball and taking sacks. And obviously, having a better offensive line is probably going to play into that, assuming that they make the adjustments that the Bears are expecting them to. But yeah, Fields' fantasy upside is super high. I draft him as definitely a top 5 quarterback in fantasy this year. The only guys that I could say right now, it's Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, and then from there you're talking, Herbert, Burrow, Fields, guys like that in that next tier. But I think Fields has the potential, if he takes that jump from a passing perspective, to be in that truly elite game-changing category.
Here at FTN Fantasy, we have our projections for each player on offense. I'm curious where you see the breakdown of the targets in the passing game. DJ Moore comes over, was the absolute number 1 in Carolina, but struggled to get those touchdowns to really bolster himself, but was a reliable midfield, explosive wide receiver. You have Darnell Mooney, who was everyone's darling last year. Now everyone is down on him. Could be a late round sort of a bounce back candidate here, post type sleeper for someone who has the deep playability now that Moore has come over here. And of course, Cole Kmet at tight end, other receivers as well. So talk about the receiving targets here and how you see the target share breaking down among those talented receivers.
So DJ Moore's the top receiver. I don't think there's going to be any real competition in that regard, assuming he stays healthy. We're seeing in training camp that, well, not in training camp yet, but, just practice in general, reports are coming out that Fields and Moore have been, creating that chemistry together, and things are clicking, at least on the practice field, which take that with a grain of salt. But I think when you watch what Moore has been able to do with, in my opinion, inferior quarterbacks in Carolina, I think there's a high ceiling with him, especially in PPR. I don't think the touchdown numbers are going to improve too much. He might get another touchdown or two compared to what he had last year, but realistically, it's another thing where Mooney's going to take touches away. I expect, from a pure touchdown perspective, you're looking Cole Kmet and Chase Claypool. I think those two are going to be some of the vultures, so to speak, that take touchdowns away from Mooney, from Moore. I think those guys are going to be more of the the volume type pass catchers. So in a PPR, I'd love DJ Moore. Even in a passing attack that wasn't super pass heavy last year, I think they're going to throw the ball a bit more, because ideally, again, you have those offensive line upgrades, you have those wide receiver upgrades, you have Robert Tonyan too at tight end, who's I think he'll end up getting some red zone touches as well. So there's going to be a lot of competition for just pure touchdowns, but in terms of receptions, I think it's going to be more. And in my opinion, I don't think it's going to be close. So that's something to keep in mind. Mooney, if he falls pretty late, if outside of that wide receiver 3 range, say falling as a wide receiver 4 on your roster or lower, I think that's when you strongly start to consider him. And then Kmet, I think, is going to be flirting with that tight end 7 to tight end 13 range, a low end tight end 1, high end tight end 2. So he's not someone I'm going out of my way to get, but he's developed as a pass catcher. He's gotten better each year. So he's someone, again, I think the only guy I'd truly be aggressive with for the Bears from a fantasy perspective is Fields. And then after that, DJ Moore. And then there's a lot of, okay, these are good players, but exactly how many touches are they going to get here?
Last question for you, Jacob. We're heading into training camp. So exciting right now. Less than a week, about a week away, and then we're going to start seeing games here. What would you say is a player or something we should focus on here in the preseason in Chicago? Because a lot of times you get these preseason sort of notes here. I remember back to Arian Foster years ago, watching him in the preseason saying, this guy is good. What should we look for here? Is it just the backfield touches? Is it a sneaky wide receiver? You mentioned Claypool, maybe someone who's disappointed from the public perspective, maybe taking a step forward touchdowns. What are 1 or 2 things to keep an eye on here as we head into training camp here for Chicago and then the preseason?
So I'm going to give you 2 offensive players to keep an eye on. So I think this is much more from a dynasty perspective than it is, or a deeper league where you have, 16 or whatever teams, something bigger like that. I think you're looking Tyler Scott, the 4th round rookie wide receiver out of Cincinnati, and Velus Jones Jr. from Tennessee. I think that Scott, especially, I'm not expecting a whole lot out of him this year because, again, the top 3 receivers are set in stone. And number 4, it's going to be a competition between him, Velus, Equinemius St. Brown, Dante Pettis. So those are going to be the guys that are, they're fighting for the primary backup reps. And but that said, I had a day 2 grade on Tyler Scott. He's someone I thought would go in the 3rd round, and he ended up, what was it, mid to late 4th or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I personally have very high hopes for him down the line. More of a speedster weapon, fits kind of Darnell Mooney's skill set, but at the same time, Mooney has much more chemistry at this point with Fields than Claypool does. So I check out Tyler Scott. He's someone in the preseason I think is going to make some noise. And Velus Jones, look, I think that the Bears are realizing he's never going to be a high volume pass catcher. And truth be told, a lot of people questioned the pick in round 3 last year. I questioned it, not to toot my own horn, but it didn't work out the way they wanted it to. But that in mind, he's still someone he's 215, 220 pounds, and he runs a 4.3. He's big and he's athletic. And that makes me think, all right, I feel like they're going to have to scheme some sort of touches his way, whether it's whether it's screens, whether it's, jet sweeps, end arounds, stuff like that. Kind of more gimmicky stuff, not more traditional wide receiver route trees, but I think he's going to get some sort of touches. And with players like that, I mean, it's not a high volume, but they can break away for a big gain at any moment. So I think that there might be a game, I think this is assuming he makes the team. I think he does, but it's kind of related. I think Equanimeous St. Brown, Tyler Scott, and Velus Jones Jr. Those are the three backup receivers. I think Pettis doesn't make the cut. Maybe they have him as like a veteran practice squad guy, but regardless, I think Velus, if you really want to get like creative with it and try, it's a bit overthinking, but there might be a game or two where he breaks away for like a 50-yard touchdown or something, and that could be like the difference between a win or a loss from a fantasy perspective. So again, not a high volume guy, but every once in a while, someone with that athletic skill set, he's got potential to, pick up some sneaky points.
And what I love here, Jacob, is you're not only giving us insight for the season, but you're giving us insight to the preseason when we hit our preseason DFS advice. So this video is going to be fantastic. And if Velus Jones gets someone a big payday, we can give you a shout out here. Thank you, Jacob Infante, at Jacob Infante24 on Twitter. Bears writer, WC Gridiron, only person I follow here for the Bears. We will check in with you, sir. Again, always appreciate you coming on, so generous with your time, and give us great insight.
No, of course. I appreciate you having me. It's always a blast. So thank you.